Okay. All right, good afternoon and welcome to the November 1st, 2024 regular meeting of the Regional Planning Committee. I'm Joe LaCava, chair of the committee and representative for the city of San Diego. Before I move forward, I'd like to ask our interpreter to provide instructions on how to access interpretation.
Message from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon world and select mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc. Please press the ellipsis with the consecutive option and then choose mute original audio to narrate the original Spanish. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga el clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio. Seleccionar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación si se encuentra en la sala de reunión. Favor de pedir auriculares en la recepcionista del vestíbulo.
I will ask our clerk, Ms. Tessa Lara, to confirm we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum with 5 of 6 voting jurisdictions present, as well as 4 advisory members.
All right, thank you for that. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respects to the unceded territory and the homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From 4 cultural groups, the Kumaya, the Diqueño, the Luiseño, the Cumpeño, and the Coahuila, this land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustice of the past. With that, I will now call the November 1st, 2020 meeting of the Regional Planning Committee to order. If you're able, please rise, face the flag, and with your heart, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we will now take up non-agenda public comment. Per our board policy, the amount of time allotted for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. Tessa, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Thank you, Chair. I have one non-agenda public comment from Catherine Rhodes. Please go ahead.
Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes, and this is for my council member, Chair Joe LaCava, and my county supervisor, Tara Lawson-Reamer. I need both of your helps in order to help the homeless. I'm looking for a few things. The first thing I'm looking for is your support to have 1,000 parking spaces at Silver Strand State Beach opened up for the homeless, and that would be for senior homeless and veterans homeless. There's 1,000 spaces there at the state campground that were closed down due to the Tijuana sewage crisis. So the beach is closed down, but the parking lot is still open. And the only reason we can do any of this is because of the city of San Diego going to the Coastal Commission and going against what Todd Gloria used to say, that you can, which he would say it's illegal to use residential on state tidelands, but there's an exception for homeless. So now the exception is done. I know that with you, Chair Joe LaCava, you previously asked for maybe Deanza Cove for the homeless and some of those hotels very close to me in Pacific Beach. I think those would be fabulous. And so anyway, there's funding at the county that can do all of this. And so I'm asking for you or for Tara Lawson-Remer to give me a call, because right now I'm talking with the people at the County of San Diego that would do all this, but I kind of need a champion. And so far, I'm trying to do this all by myself. So please communicate with me, and I believe we could actually house 1,000 veterans and seniors, you know, in a few weeks. With some type of support that we don't have, and you know, of course, we need leaders.
That concludes the public comments.
All right. Thank you, Tessa. Mario, would you have any comments you'd like to share?
Just thank you, Chair. A couple of updates. We've been tracking the Office of Independent Auditors recommendations. We should be coming to the board sometime in December, if not January, with a couple of reclassifications of positions to align with the processes and the reorganization that we've been proposing. A couple of announcements on projects. The San Diego Lagoon Wetland Restoration was open. We had a great opening ceremony, and this project acts as an environmental mitigation both for the I-5 carpool lanes and HOV lanes, the Lawson double tracking, as well as the city's project in that area. SANDAG hosted a housing policy forum. This was to provide information on the most recent legislation information, but we had 140 attendees, so that was pretty good. We had Senator Nancy Skinner and Assembly Member Alex Lee as panelists on that forum. CalSTA, the California State Transportation Agency, awarded SANDAG and North County Transit $38 million. Part of that money was for the Del Mar Bluffs stabilization phase 5, and another part to act as matching funds if we were to get a grant for the Eastbrook and Shell double tracking project. We did go to Mexico City with the regional chamber. We had some substantial discussions with the new Mexican administration. I think that was one of the main goals, is to get to know the new Mexican federal administration. And we had some good discussions on the border projects, Otay Mesa East, and there was also discussions during the trip on the Tijuana River issue. The team continues to work on airport to transit connection. I think we're developing a survey, and we should be coming pretty soon to the board with an update on that project. And on the regional plan, the team is trying to balance everything. We have put it out there. So now, being a responsible RTP has to align the costs with the proposed or the forecasted revenues. So the team is trying to balance that, as well as to be within air quality conformity. And I think the last piece is that we have been spending quite a bit of time talking about the SR 125. The board has asked us to further evaluate other options to see how we could pay off that road earlier. And at the same time, we're looking into putting it in the RTP with the no toll scenario, so we could be within air conformity. That concludes my report, Chair.
All right, thank you, Mario. Also an opportunity for committee members that want to make a comment about their jurisdiction. Okay, not seeing any.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Karen Jewell with Caltrans. The two things I wanted to mention, one is that the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant application guide and call for applications was released October 24th, and the district grant application workshops are currently taking place now. District 11, a San Diego workshop will be scheduled soon, and a headquarters statewide workshop and tribal workshop will follow the district workshops. Those applications will be due January 22nd, with the awards announced sometime in the summer of 2025. And then I also want to just put a reminder out there that starting tonight, 52 eastbound will be closed for 56 hours, so through Monday morning between 8:05 and 15. And that detour goes south down to 8 and back up to 15.
Thank you for that update. I'm not seeing any other hands come up. We'll go on to the consent calendar. There's only one item on the consent, approval of the minutes from our September 6th meeting. Tessa, do we have any public comment on the consent item?
There are no public comments.
All right. Any board member comments, corrections? Or otherwise, we just need a motion on the consent?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Councilman, and the second from Wells. And we're actually going to vote using the devices, so please vote. And that passes unanimously with County of San Diego absent. Now on to item 3, which is the Smart Growth Incentive Program. Stacy Cooper and Goldie Herban will present on the Smart Growth Incentive Program. The Regional Planning Committee is being asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the evaluation criteria and release the Cycle 6 call for projects.
Good afternoon, Chair LaCava, members of the Regional Planning Committee. My name is Goldie Herban, and I'm the Program Manager for the Smart Growth Incentive Program. I'm joined by my colleague Stacy today to talk about the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 call for projects, and we are seeking your recommendation to approve and release the call. Before Stacy dives into the development of the call for projects, I just want to briefly go over an overview of the grant program. The Smart Growth Incentive Program is a competitive grant initiative, and it's funded solely through the Transnet Extension Ordinance. This program provides funding for transportation-related planning and construction projects that support smart growth development. Smart growth refers to a development pattern that focuses future growth and infill development near jobs, services, and public amenities, facilitating mixed use and transit-oriented development that increases housing and transportation choices. To date, SANDAG has completed 5 cycles of the Smart Growth Incentive Program, beginning with Cycle 1 in 2009 and concluding with our most recent cycle, Cycle 5 in 2022. The cycle numbers and the awards associated with each cycle are shown in the bar chart on the left, and the pie chart demonstrates on the right side our overall investment of close to $60 million to the region since the program's inception. To date, the Smart Growth Incentive Program has funded over 70 planning and construction projects. Additionally, the projects that have been awarded have also been able to leverage an additional $47 million from other funding sources, bringing the total regional investment to just over $100 million. On this slide are photos of completed construction projects by the cities of Lemon Grove, Chula Vista, San Marcos, and the city of San Diego. Other notable construction projects include traffic calming infrastructure, pedestrian promenades, and improvements to sidewalks, gutters, and curbs. Past planning projects include developing innovative financing mechanisms, completing mixed-use and commercial corridor plans, in addition to complete street design manuals. Now I'll hand it over to Stacy to cover the call for projects development.
Thank you, Goldie. Good afternoon, everyone. So this slide shows the timeline of stakeholder engagement that helped us develop the Cycle 6 call for projects. Last November, we held a listening session with local jurisdiction staff. From June through September, we brought the draft evaluation criteria to the Sustainable Communities, Mobility, and Social Equity Working Groups, Transportation Committee, you guys before in September, and the Climate Action Task Force for discussion and feedback. So at the listening session with the jurisdiction staff, we gauged interest in the Cycle 6 and learned about staff capacity, barriers, and ways SANDAG could help address those barriers. Feedback received from the working groups and PACs included raising the maximum award amounts to account for inflation, greater consideration for equity and investing in underserved communities, reducing the administrative burden on applicants, and funding projects in descending order without consideration for the number of awards an applicant could receive. In July 2023, so July of last year, the Transportation Committee requested several changes to be made to how SANDAG conducts all call for projects, which are summarized on this slide. These changes provide greater transparency to the process and distribute funding more broadly across the region. And then in response to the feedback we heard through stakeholder engagement over the past year, these are the other changes that we're bringing to the program. We've increased the project maximum awards for planning projects from $500,000 to $1 million, and for capital projects from $2.5 million to $3.5 million. We've enhanced the community engagement criteria to prioritize projects that are community-led, include underserved and limited English proficiency populations, and provide a meaningful role for the community throughout the project lifespan. We've reduced the administrative burden on applicants by simplifying the application process and also providing technical assistance to all applicants during the application period, and allowing jurisdictions with an adapted climate action plan to receive funding for monitoring or implementation efforts that align with SGIP principles and the 2021 Regional Plan Environmental Impact Report. And now on to eligibility for the program. So in previous cycles of the SGIP program, we only funded projects within geographically restricted smart growth opportunity areas, or SGOAs, and the location and extent of SGOAs were defined with each regional plan. To provide greater flexibility and fewer restrictions on where funds can be invested, we're proposing to remove the geographic boundaries from eligibility criteria. Instead, projects would need to further smart growth principles and the goals and objectives of the 2021 Regional Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. With the adoption of the 2021 Regional Plan and the GHG Mitigation Measure 5A included in the EIR, applicants must have a locally adopted CAP or GHG reduction plan to be eligible to receive grant funding for planning and capital projects through this program. Agencies that do not have an adopted CAP or GHG reduction plan can apply for this funding to develop one under the Climate Action Plan project type, which Goldie will get into a little bit later. And the evaluation criteria for this project type prioritizes funding for new CAPs over other Climate Action Plan activities. I'm going to pass it back to Goldie.
Great. Now, similar to most competitive grant programs, previous Smart Growth Incentive Program call for projects have awarded points for matching funds. Points are awarded based on the amount of match funds the applicant provided compared to the total cost of the project. Other Transnet funds, including local street and road program funding, were allowed to be used as a match. Most federal and state discretionary programs do not allow applicants to provide matching funds that are from the same source as the grant program that they are applying for. Staff has reviewed the ballot language shown here. We've also reviewed the Transit Extension Ordinance and Expenditure Plan and Board Policy number 31. And while there is no specific language that allows for or prohibits the use of other Transnet funds as match for the Smart Growth Incentive Program funding, staff believes that the intent of the voters was not to allow the use of Transnet in this matter because the ballot language specifically refers to match state/federal funds on the top line there. Upon delving into the ordinance language further, which is shown on the slide, it states that it is intended that these funds be used to match federal, state, local, and private funding to maximize the number of improvements to be implemented. Staff recommends that other Transnet funding, including local, street, and road program funding, not be permitted match funds as a source. We realize that other local, state, and federal funding is limited, and therefore matching funds are not required. Additionally, the percentage of points available for projects with matching funds has been reduced to 5% for Cycle 6. When this topic was brought to the Transportation Committee last month for consideration, concerns were raised regarding the awarding the points for matching funds because it may disproportionately affect smaller cities that do not have additional funds besides Transnet to provide as a match. The Transportation Committee recommended the board approve the recommendation that other Transnet funds, like local street and road program funding, not be allowed as a match. Sorry, to go back, the RPC is asked to consider TC's recommendation today, but does have the discretion in making its own recommendation to the board. So now I'll go over the final call for projects, last item here. So on this slide, we're showing the types of project categories that will be funded for cycle 6. Similar to previous cycles, staff proposes 2 types of projects that can be funded, planning and capital. And then to address the mitigation measure of the 2021 regional plan EIR, a 3rd project type was added for climate action plans. The majority of funds, however, will be made available to the capital category, as you'll see on the next slide. So for cycle 6, staff is proposing to release $45 million in funding. The pie chart on the left shows the proposed amounts for each funding category. We have $30 million available for capital, $12 million for planning, and $3 million for the remaining for capital action plans. Agencies would be able to submit multiple applications for consideration under each project category. And if there's leftover funding available in a specific project category, it could be potentially used for another project type. The table on the right includes the minimum and maximum award sizes for each category, along with the performance period that's required under board policy. And I just want to point out the 2 raised amounts that Stacy mentioned earlier. We have planning maximums raised to $1 million and capital raised to $3.5 million as a result of work group and PAC feedback. So now I'll briefly touch on the evaluation criteria. These 2 tables are the evaluation criteria for planning and capital projects. They are largely the same, except on the capital side, there's an additional evaluation criteria under 4A, major milestones completed. This criteria provides points for projects that are progressing through typical capital project milestones, such as planning, environmental, permitting, et cetera. And then we've also added a new criteria titled efficient use of program funds. This is a new criteria for this cycle and evaluates project scopes, budget, and schedule, and will award points to projects that clearly demonstrate how they will efficiently use program funds. The grant application will provide guidance to applicants to consider when developing their schedule, scopes, and budgets, encouraging applicants to address the typical challenges that we see for past awarded projects in an attempt to reduce agreement amendments and withdrawals in the future. All right, and the last table is the evaluation criteria for the final project category, which is climate action plans. As mentioned previously, SANDAG does require that local jurisdictions have an adopted climate action plan in order to be eligible to receive smart growth funding. This category of funding is available for 3 types of projects, and they're on the bulleted list in the blue ribbon on your left. For any new climate action plan or CAP updates, those projects will be evaluated under evaluation criteria number 1. Eligible activities besides the CAP itself can also include greenhouse gas emissions inventories, forecasts, and reduction targets. And then for agencies who already have a CAP or updated CAPs, but are seeking funding for implementation and monitoring, those projects will be evaluated under criteria number 2. And any new CAPs or CAP updates can also receive points under evaluation criteria 2 if they include implementation and monitoring activities. And finally, any planning or capital projects that come out of a climate action plan would apply for funding in the planning or capital project types. So here we show our upcoming timeline for the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 call for projects. We've been going to PACs, we're going to ITALK and the board in the October-November timeframe. We went to the Transportation Committee October 18th. We're here at RBC on November 1st. We plan on going to ITALK on the 13th of November, followed by the board on November 22nd. Upon board approval, we'll release the call. We're aiming for the end of November, which would initiate a 90-day application window. So we would close the application window at the end of February. And that would be followed by the evaluation and development of recommendations in the spring timeframe. And then after that, we will take the recommendations to ITALK, PACS, and the board between May and July. And we anticipate executing agreements and issuing notices to proceed in October of 2025. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair LaCava for any discussion and comment.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. With that, Tessa, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We have one public commenter, Catherine Rhodes. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is Catherine Rhodes. And so now what I'm looking for is for somebody on the board to send this to staff for them to actually go over what I'm going to propose. Again, I'm going to propose housing for the homeless on state tidelands of Silver Strand State Beach, De Anza Cove in Mission Bay, Fiesta Island in Mission Bay, South Shore Parking Lot in Mission Bay, and the one in Silver Strand specifically for seniors and veterans, because it's ready to go. It's already been California Coastal Commission approved. I went to the Coastal Commission and, they confirmed all they need to know is that you have on-site wastewater disposal and you have a way to capture your stormwater. And that's kind of like their only thing that they're looking for in order to get a coastal development permit. So that would be the fastest one to go. But what I'm asking you is to go to staff and ask them to specifically work with me on getting these sites opened for the homeless, because it literally is, would do so many things for you. Part of it is a vision zero. So many people who die on our streets are homeless. They die because they're going onto Caltrans property in order to escape the city of San Diego's criminalization of them on city property, and then they die. And so, this would also help for housing. And over there, like at Silver Strand, there's actually a bus route that goes there. And we could actually empty out, let's say, in my neighborhood here in Pacific Beach, we could empty out all the different homeless people that live in their cars. And we could put 1,000 of them at Silver Strand State Beach tomorrow if I only had one person who would forward this to the board. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you, Tessa. Staff has made a recommendation on this one, so we'll turn it over to committee members for comments, questions, and we will need a motion. Anybody want to kick this off? Councilmember Musgrove.
I'm sure Goldie thinks I'm haunting her since I was in transportation. The question I had is in the criteria where right now we have 9 of the 18 cities in our county all have sales tax measures to try and generate additional income, and some are targeted, but mostly they're for infrastructure, which is horribly needed. So given that the clear reading of the ordinance now precludes using existing funds that would come in to make your matching funds, that's fine. Now we have to abide by our own ordinance and the rules for the Transnet funding. But for those jurisdictions that can have matching funds, they're awarded an additional 5% point. So it seems counterintuitive that those jurisdictions that may not be able to come up with that money are then disenfranchised from that. So my question at transportation was, could we take that 5% bonus for having matching funds out of the scoring matrix? Since I get that we have the ordinance and we simply were not enforcing it as we should, but it does seem to be, like I said, a little counterintuitive for those communities. And I'm not picking on any one community because quite frankly, San Marcos is strapped right now. That's why we have a sales tax measure. I don't know that we could come up with the matching funds. So this is a funding source to help us all get a little bit further ahead. I just think to level the playing field, take that 5% out of the scoring matrix. And that would be my recommendation. And was.
Chair, if I could
yeah.
jump in real quick. As far as the Transnet ordinance and what it requires or what it prohibits, the ordinance doesn't specifically prohibit using local streets and roads as a matching fund for the Smart Growth Incentive Program. I think what staff is trying to convey is that there are other grant programs, state and federal funded and local funded programs where that is a best practice, where funding from one program can't be used to match funding for your grant program if they're the same. But I just wanted to be clear that the Transnet ordinance doesn't actually prohibit the use of the funds in that way.
Then it just might have been either the way I interpreted the comment, but I want to make sure you said you
Mhm.
can or cannot use other funding sources, federal, state, what have you.
It's actually intended to match all federal funding sources. So what the ordinance says in the paragraph that they mentioned above is it specifically mentions an intention to leverage state and federal funds in using this local funding source. So it mentions that as kind of the intent of the ordinance, but it doesn't say you can't use local streets and roads to match this funding source.
Just not Transnet funds.
It doesn't say that either.
I
So
think
because
that's how it
local
was-
streets.
Did
and
I
roads-
misunderstand then at transportation? We talked about that Transnet, existing Transnet funds could not be used to be the matching fund. That's not accurate.
No, the team saw it as the spirit, and that's how they're bringing it up,
Mhm.
but nowhere does it specifically preclude it. And it's this committee's prelude also to recommend waiving that, changing anything. And I think that's what the team, through our process, we're really open, and they brought up what they think, but that doesn't mean that that is the rule, because it's not a rule.
There's flexibility here, in other
Yeah.
words.
It's a guideline. Thank you.
Not seeing any other hands up. Can I get a clarification to the council member's point? If I'm going for $1 million and I have $1 million in matching funds, presumably I would get 5 points for my application. If I had $500,000, would I just get lesser points or 0 points?
There's actually a chart. Hold on, Jenny, is it the whole call for projects is included? Do you know the page offhand? So within the call for projects, if you go into the rubric for that particular, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. If you go into the rubric for that particular item, it gives you the breakdown of a percentage and how much it is up to 5 points. But it's not like 100, we don't anticipate anybody to have 100% of the funding. But let me get back to you on the exact page of where that is, but it is in the call for projects under the scoring rubric for whatever number that is.
So, but in general, if you had some money, you could get some points. So it's not like you're precluded if you don't have exactly.
Correct.
Okay.
But there's
it's a
2
sliding
points
scale.
that need to be, there are 2 different points that need to be clarified. That is one, the matching points, and the team is going to bring it up. The other point of reference council member brought up is that the proposal was to not accept Transnet local funds as a match. And what legal counsel has expressed is that's a recommendation, but it's not something that's stated as a rule, as a shall. The team is interpreted as a should, and they're putting it in the guidelines. That doesn't mean that you cannot say in your recommendation, change it, say, no, we're okay accepting the money that comes through Transnet to the local cities to be used as a match. That's your prelude here. The team was saying it looked like the spirit was to use it to bring in other colors of money and not the same color of money, Transnet, but it doesn't preclude it. So those 2 different things.
Mario said it much better than I did.
And just to clarify, so I just found the page. So for the planning or for capital, it's page 55 of your agenda packet. And for 20 to 25% or above of total project costs, you get the full 5 points.
Okay.
So-
And I think just to add on to that, it's matching of the total project cost, not the grant that you're looking for.
Correct.
Right.
Total
So
project cost.
if I have a $10 million project,
Yes.
that's what it's going to be measured
Right.
against. Okay. Total project. Okay.
So ultimately, if we make this recommendation and the board approves it, it will go out to our jurisdictions as whatever funding sources you happen to have, regardless of the source, you will get points for matching based on the rubric. Is that an accurate assessment? Okay, thank you.
But the recommendation is that you cannot use the Transnet local roads funds. You
So
can change that, but right now the recommendation as it is, correct me, Goldie, on
Yes,
that.
that's correct. So the recommendation as it is that Transnet funding cannot be used as match for this program.
So that seems conflicting because if it's a recommendation, but you can't, then you either can or you can't.
So staff is bringing it forward as a recommendation, but this body has the authority to make a different recommendation.
Fantastic. So this kind of goes back to the transportation meeting then. Okay.
Yes, so
Right.
the board will ultimately approve a recommendation and approve the call for projects and we will release it. But whatever is sent forward to them, they will be given the option.
I would rather that we not award the points at all if we're going to disenfranchise one jurisdiction over another based on the funding source or the ambiguity of what that is. Just take the points away.
Oh, so you're not suggesting that you could be allowed to use Transnet funds? You want to just actually remove that entirely?
I think it's a fair way to level the playing field. We can make the recommendation and ultimately it's going to be the board's decision. And I think those are the two factors to weigh. Do we allow Transnet funds or any funds that may have come through other than, externally from California or the federal government? Or do we look at the 5% as a qualifier and then those that were not awarded external funds or they simply don't have the funds within their own general operating budget, they're going to be left aside. And we know this is going to come down to percentage points.
Right, yeah. Does the staff want to respond to the idea of just removing entirely as a criteria?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that you could recommend. The only thing is because board policy 33 needs to be 25% of the points, we couldn't just remove those. We would have to reallocate them somewhere else, which, I mean, I'm not saying is a problem. I'm just saying that is the implication.
I think that's what we did on this next cycle from the previous cycle, if I'm not mistaken, at the presentation we had 2 weeks ago. It was specifically stated that some of the percentages were adjusted. I think there was a fourth on item 4, if I'm not mistaken. If we pull the slide back up. Well, you're pressing my memory now on this one.
We adapted the evaluation criteria from
The side,
past
yeah, the one
cycles.
that's side by side.
Oh, the two charts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
There we go.
the question is, have we changed the breakdown in percentages of the evaluation criteria between cycles? And I think the answer is
Between
yes.
cycles, yes. Since we started this whole, bringing it through the PACs and committees, no, we have not. But yes, between cycles, yeah, because even matching funds, I want to say was 3% in the last cycle for capital and 10% for planning. Like we have, that's at our discretion to work through the criteria.
I just wanted to add that going through our deep dive and just a couple of findings that might facilitate your discussion or your decision. Of the 65 applicants that we just analyzed as part of this exercise since TC, we found that 90% had matching funds and the source of that funding was diverse. So like if an agency, a small agency didn't have funds on hand, they would use in-kind. And I see that often. Most grantees or jurisdictions use in-kind staff hours as their match. Other types of match that are used are developer fees, other grant fees, parking fees, et cetera. And smaller cities are not so, providing match fund is not the make or break. There have been past cycles where projects have been awarded and the awarded projects, some have match and some don't. So it's not necessarily the make or break. But yes, there's 5 points allocated to it. So it does contribute to their overall.
So Goldie, would there be a way that we highlight that matching funds are in kind? Because the agencies are going to spend time and therefore highlighting that would make it, did not disenfranchise a local agency that doesn't have this cash flow strap.
Yeah.
Maybe they say, oh my God, yeah, we will tabulate our staff time and that can be the matching funds and they're still getting the points, highlighting that maybe.
Yeah,
it's
and they're
something-
scoring in the detailed scoring rubric, that's an eligible match. Yeah.
I think that's a fair way to present it to the jurisdictions, that there are options to meet those matching fund requirements that aren't necessarily hard dollars, but labor hours, planning, development that will go into the project itself.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we need any clarification about how the soft costs?
I think the team can assure the committee that we will be, when this is put out the call, we will highlight in the call that, in-kind efforts are eligible to be considered matching.
Yeah, and just so you know that after we put out the call for projects, we hold a workshop for all the jurisdictions to walk through the call to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands the application. After that, we do offer like one-on-one consultation to answer any questions or kind of just talk them through their project, whatever they need help with. So those options are out there, but yes, we can definitely make it a point to make sure that in-kind is put out as being an option for everyone.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the thoroughness of the presentations. Thank you.
I think we've come now full circle back to the staff recommendation. So
Were we looking for a second?
We need it.
so you're moving the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Make the motion.
All right. Not seeing any other hands up. I want to make sure I look around the room. I want to thank you for the presentation. I want to thank you for that, really leaning into the conversation about the Transnet funds and where that fits in light of what happened at the Regional Transportation Committee and Councilmember Musgrove's questions. The clarification about the soft costs being part of what's eligible in terms of matching funds. And also I would add the clarification that this is really more gap financing rather than actually driving the entirety of a project. So when you're looking for that last little bit to complete your funding package, this would be a source of that. And I appreciate the willingness to retain the matching funds as a criteria, because I know these funds get very competitive and it gets more and more difficult for staff to actually figure out which ones to do the awarding. So with that, we're moving the staff recommendation by Councilmember Musgrove and a second by Councilmember?
Yeah, this year.
This year? Councilmember Martinez. All right, please vote. And that passes unanimously with County of San Diego absent. And with that, we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, which is item 4, Regional Climate Action Planning. And I'll turn it over to Anna Bettis and Susan Friedman to present this item.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Anna Bettis. I'm a senior regional planner here at SANDAG. And today I'll be providing an update on the work that SANDAG has been doing with local governments, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders with funding from the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, which is a national effort that is funding the development of regional and state climate action plans all across the country. So with that, I'll move to the agenda. I'll start with an overview of the planning grant that SANDAG received from the EPA, which is supporting all of the regional climate action planning work that I'll be talking about today. Then I'll speak to the near-term regional climate action plan that SANDAG completed earlier this year, which we're calling the San Diego Regional Priority Climate Action Plan, or Priority CAP for short, which you might recall we brought to you in May of this year. And then from there, I will talk about the long-term regional climate action plan that's currently being developed, or the San Diego Regional Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or Comprehensive CAP for short. And then I'll share our current thinking on the outreach and engagement that we are planning to complete the comprehensive CAP. And as I share what we've been working on, I'd love for you to think about any feedback that you might have in terms of what kinds of measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions you might want us to consider for that plan, or any feedback you might have on the outreach that we have proposed. And lastly, I'll talk about the next steps for us when it comes to developing that comprehensive CAP. With that, I will kick us off with an overview of the EPA grant that's funding this work. So you might recall in September of 2023, SANDAG accepted a planning grant from the EPA as part of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. As I mentioned, that is a national effort. And as part of that national program, for the first time ever, 96% of the US population is now covered by a climate action plan, just to give you a sense of the scale of that program. And this grant that SANDAG is working on has 3 deliverables. The first is a priority climate action plan, which is near term, so it's through 2030, and it's focused only on the sectors with the highest greenhouse gas emissions. And we completed that one in March of this year. Second is the comprehensive CAP, which is long-term, looking out through 2050. It includes additional sectors and has additional elements such as an updated greenhouse gas inventory that will also be included in our regional plan, and updating or creating greenhouse gas projections and more, which I'll talk about in future slides. And this is the one that's currently being developed and is due at the end of 2025. Third, they asked that we report back on the status of the measures that we've outlined in these plans out in 2027. Okay, so starting with our first deliverable, the priority CAP that we've completed, this includes 9 measures and 22 actions to reduce emissions primarily from transportation, energy, and buildings. And these are things like continuing funding for the Youth Opportunity Pass, incentives for electric vehicles, prioritizing low-income and disadvantaged communities, for example. And it built on existing climate action plans in the region, and includes priorities that we heard through outreach with local governments, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders during its development. And the purpose of that first deliverable was really to provide a near-term vision for climate action in the region. And the next deliverable is that comprehensive CAP, which is currently underway and will build on the priority CAP. And it must consider how to reduce emissions across the 7 sectors that you see listed on the right-hand side of the slide. And the purpose of that is really to provide a long-term vision for climate action at a regional scale. And we hope that that plan will help support regional coordination on climate. And we also hope that it can help SANDAG and others be more competitive for state and local funding. The comprehensive CAP also needs to include a new greenhouse gas inventory and projections and targets, like I mentioned. Additionally, it will look at how the measures outlined in the plan would improve air quality and benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. It will also look at the workforce that would be needed for the measures to be implemented. And to get there and develop all of that, there are multiple ways that we're planning to do outreach and engagement with stakeholders, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So one way that we're hearing from stakeholders is by hosting what we're calling regional climate table workshops, which are in-person gatherings where we can hear from local governments, regional agencies, tribal governments, community-based organizations, and environmental and social equity groups, and others. And so we've already hosted the first one on the comprehensive CAP back in July, and we're planning to host 2 more before we finish up the development of the comprehensive CAP. Another avenue that we are soliciting input is through our bi-monthly interagency meetings, where we can hear from your staff as we develop the CCAP. And third, to solicit more broad public feedback, we'll be developing a regional public survey. Additionally, we've contracted with several CBOs to help us conduct additional community engagement. And lastly, we're engaging with other stakeholder groups at community events and soliciting input at SANDAG working groups and committees. For example, in September, we went to the Social Equity Working Group and Tribal Transportation Working Group. So looking ahead, we will continue working on the draft measures this winter, taking into account all the feedback that we received through that engagement. We expect to host our next climate table workshop early next year, where we'll share out the draft measures that we're proposing for the comprehensive cap, and we'll also launch the public survey. In the spring, we expect to complete the updated regional greenhouse gas inventory, and we anticipate that in the summer of next year, we will share the draft comprehensive cap publicly to get feedback and comments on it, and we'll host that last climate table workshop specifically on the CCAP. And so I look forward to hearing any thoughts that you have for us. Again, if it's with the measures that we should be thinking about for the plan or the outreach that we've proposed or anything else that might have come to mind during the presentation. With that, I'll conclude my presentation. You can reach me if you think of something after on my email on the slide. But I'll conclude there.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Tessa, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I have one public commenter. Catherine Rhodes, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Catherine Rhodes, and I want to talk about again how we could reduce greenhouse gases. And one of them is to have more Border Patrol agents. You know, the border bill had 2,200 new Border Patrol agents, so we could actually secure the border. But more importantly, it could open up all those border lanes that are closed constantly due to lack of Border Patrol staff. Some of the ports of entry in, not in Tijuana right there, but other ports of entry are only open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we could reduce greenhouse gases tremendously by having less wait times at the border. So that's a pretty easy solution. And so, one of the things also is, so that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the city of San Diego, the only type of climate action they have as preventable measures is porous pavement. Porous pavement is their solution to climate, to sea level rise, which is, not much. And so I very much think that SANDAG should come up with a plan for all the old saltwater marshes areas, and that includes the Midway area, that includes Mission Bay, around the port of San Diego. And what it would be is a reclamation project to actually create underground space in these areas of saltwater marshes by creating bathtub foundations and a transportation corridor from the border all the way up to Pacific Beach. And so, so for climate, I really think you need to have some type of standard for building high-rise structures on liquefiable soils. But right now, the only thing we have is porous pavement. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. This is an information item. No motion is required, but I'll turn it over to committee members for any comments or questions. Not seeing any.
I just had one.
Oh, yes. Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, Anna, thank you
Right,
for the
sure.
presentation. When you do outreach, have all cities participated in that, or what kind of response are you having from the outreach that you've done so far?
Yeah, we've been having bi-monthly interagency meetings where we've had a lot of cities. I'll have to look back at the list of the attendees. I do have my list of the organizations that were at our last climate table on hand. So we did have City of Carlsbad, Del Mar, Encinitas, Imperial Beach, San Diego, Solana Beach, Vista, County of San Diego, Port of San Diego. Oh, it's Port. So we had quite a few at our last climate table, but I don't know if you want to jump in here. They're roughly like a couple dozen at every local meeting.
We do get, hi, I'm Susan Friedman, the Climate Planning Manager. We do get a strong turnout from local government staff, but we are missing a couple cities, and part of that's been staff capacity and staff turnover. And so we try to reach out from folks if we're not hearing from them after a few months to see if there's, new people on staff that can come and participate. And we also offer to do one-on-one meetings.
Okay. Not seeing any other. I'll ask one last question. With SANDAG completing this, would cities be able to leverage off this to either prepare a climate action plan or update their climate action plan? Would the data be generated in a way that they could take advantage of that?
I think that this is going to help inform future climate action plan updates because we're going to be looking at the latest and greatest state regulations and federal policy and how the region decarbonizes by 2045, which some of the older caps in the region don't address just yet. I don't think, and I think we also will have regionally based data, and from that, that's going to be used in coordination with the 2025 regional plan. Once all that's adopted, we'll be able to pull that into supporting local jurisdiction efforts and their cap data needs.
Okay, great. Might save them a little bit of trouble, time and money to be able to do that. So not seeing the other hands go up, we'll conclude item 4. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. I appreciate everyone's participation today. The next regular meeting of the Regional Planning Committee is tentatively scheduled for January 3rd, 2025 at 1 p.m. The 2025 legislative calendar is on the agenda for the November 8th board meeting. Once approved, the next Regional Planning Committee date will be confirmed and posted. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good weekend.